welcome to the channel and my final thoughts on Pericles, the Peloponnesian War. Now, if you've been following this channel at all, you've known I went on an insane 38 episode playthrough of this game, which I gotta wonder if that was really the way to do it. As you can see in the beginning, I was kind of going really long 45-minute episodes and things like that. And then I started saying, well, that's just a lot to ask for people, and so I'm like cutting them down to 10-minute bites of each. But of course, that multiplied the number of them, and I guess it's an awful lot to ask someone to stick through. A lot of people. Some people said they liked it, and I got a few comments saying they're glad that this happened. And in a sense, it's really almost for me. I'm still trying to get comfortable in front of the camera. I also want to get used to pumping out content regularly and doing something like this. Kind of helps me. I'm not quite as comfortable where I want to be, where I talk extemporaneously and riffing like that. But I'm getting better, I think. A little bit better. In the future, I don't think I'm going to subject the world to just these monster playthroughs. As you can see, even in this game, at some point, I was starting to edit out some of the procedure, and I think if I do a future game, that's going to be kind of the ticket. Is in the beginning when nobody knows anything about the game, I'll go through the procedure fully, just so people can see it. But then when we move on through the game, I'll just cut in when there's real decisions to be made, or there's a exceptional rule or something like that. I think that'll end up being better than just 38 episodes of just 10 turns of the suicide of Greece. But I enjoyed it, and so let us get to what I think about this game. So, I love this game. That's my final thoughts. Thank you for watching. Okay.
So it's time for my final thoughts! I really enjoyed
The Great War,
and I hope you did too.
Seriously, I do love this, but I am predisposed to love it just because of my contact with so much of Thucydides and this period. I think, if I'm being frank, it does present a barrier for other players thinking about getting into this, and I think one is a kind of a natural barrier in that. And I'm going to make a little semi-serious joke here. It's hyperbolic, but so don't at me. But I make the joke that there's basically three types of war games: World War II, American Civil War, other. And Pericles most decidedly falls in under other. And I mean, there's no getting around. In fact, I even know professors who've kind of joked among themselves. It says, I'm trying to think of something to publish worthwhile. And the other professor will say, well, just publish something on the Civil War. It doesn't even have to be good. People will lap it up. And again, that's I'm being exaggerating here, but there's a fair truth in why we're gravitating towards these later conflicts. Is simply, when it comes down to it, is the copious documentation we have for them. I mean, and there's something for everyone. I mean, somebody interested in World War II, you can get one guy who's just interested in the gear, and he can sit there and just nitpick over the specifications between a Spitfire and a Messerschmitt 109. Or you can have guys who are just into the grand strategy, and they can read all the documentation, all the memoirs and things like that, and how allies were deciding on a Europe first policy. You can get all that, and it's all there to read and things like that. When you come to something like from 531 BC, the documentation just isn't there. It's hard to find something to really bite your teeth into. And Mark actually makes this point in the first page of the rule book. And I'll read it to you. Historical note: the Peloponnesian War period is not well documented. So anyone holding strong opinions on what is or is not historical, including myself, is standing on quicksand. I have researched and taught on this subject at major universities for several decades, so while this design represents my best thinking, I remind myself that I am painting on a big canvas with broad strokes. It was my objective and intent to ensure that all events that occurred in the historical record, Thucydides, Xenophon, can and do occur in Pericles. So, revel in the experience of a self-inflicted military disaster before you worry about balance and about whether the design is broken. And just remember the Athenians in Sicily inexplicably did know better. Yeah, I like the little dig here about the broken thing. I think he gets a lot of grumpy emails or grumpy forum posts. You get that? Do you get that sense? I think I get that sense. I can point out a few more things where he gets a little snarky. Go buy a computer game if you want. Yeah. Stuff like that. Okay, but anyway, the point is, I think someone who doesn't have a lot of knowledge of this period might find looking at this game maybe a little intimidating. I don't want to overstate that. I mean, it's not. I mean, it wouldn't be hard to get into an overview. Say, pick up. What do we got? Davis Hannison's War Like No Other. If you wanted to read a book, an overview of something on the YouTube or something like that. On the YouTubes. Sorry. Or you can go straight to the source if you're feeling bold, and that's Thucydides. That's a little of a climb. Simply because, I mean, it's a classic. And when you think of classics, you think of ivy-covered halls with pipe-smoking professors and tweed jackets with elbow patches on them, and, you know, lecturing in the style. And it can be a little off-putting, I suppose. It's not that part. It's not that hard. It's Thucydides is a little. He's if you think of classics as being very austere, Thucydides is the king of that. I've heard jokes where even contemporaries couldn't read Thucydides. And I even remember reading a letter from Tolkien. He was supposed to be reading his Thucydides, but he had just discovered like the Gothic language or something like that, and he was neglecting his Thucydides. He didn't care. But you can certainly go that route. But it's a little more of a climb than say, and I wanted to contrast that with something like Andean Abyss. When I picked that up, I had zero knowledge of the Colombian Civil War. But you sit down, you start playing, he includes all the background and things like that, and you're just reading it, and you pick it up, and you're just like, oh yeah, I get that. I understand what this conflict's about, things like that. And oh, there's some interesting stories in here, like the DoD contractors that got captured by the FARC and imprisoned for 8 years or something crazy like that. And there's just a lot of really documented stories. It goes back to the documentation. But supposing that you kind of get the background you need, just enough to get the interest in this game, things get a lot easier, because this is, and I'm going to go ahead and say it, elegant. A very elegantly designed war game. And what do I mean by elegant? Well, what I really mean is once you have a handle on the rules, the sequence of play flows very smoothly and intuitively. The rules themselves, learning those, I'd say about a medium. There are some persnickety rules that you have to keep in mind, but it's not too daunting. It might be a little daunting for someone who just hasn't done war games at all and would come from, Euros, which are all about the elegance. You may find this a little challenging, but it's not too brutal. And once you've got it down, it's very easy to implement. You're not diving back into rule books too much. And in fact, here's the sequence of play, which I printed straight out of the rule book. I didn't even need to go to Board Game Geek for a file that has like this summary on that. The sequence of play here is very well written out, and it fits all on one page. And you can see I made some scribbles in there, little reminders and things like that, but that is enough. And I have no trouble getting through this game. However, that brings us to what I consider the second barrier, and it's kind of the doozy. And that's the time commitment. Even though this thing flows nice and smooth, it hoovers up time. I was looking on the forums, and I saw one guy who was talking about the five turn, one of the Peloponnesian Wars, the first or second, I can't remember which, and it took him 7 hours with a group. And I can't remember if that was also teaching the game. I kind of think it was. But even if it wasn't teaching the game, you're still looking at a good, I'd say 45 minutes to an hour per turn. So when you're talking about the full scenario, 10 turns, that's going to be multiple sessions with big hours in each one of them. And that may not be a very good fit for a lot of people. And so that may be one of the big barriers to getting into this. I mean, naturally, there's short scenarios. Let me think here. Okay, I went back and looked through the scenarios because I really haven't done anything other than the full campaign. But there's all these one-turn vignettes, and they're actually pretty interesting on their own, just to teach parts of it. And it's kind of a good game in its own right, like a War of the Aegean, something like that. But of course, the main event is either the first Peloponnesian War, the second Peloponnesian War, or both of them together in the full 10-turn campaign. And you saw those trigger, if you watch the video, see there's a trigger for the end game. So even though it's slated for 5 turns, it could end as soon as 3. But then again, like I said, when you're looking at 45 minutes to an hour turn, even if it does end in 3 turns, you're still looking at 3 hours. So that is something definitely to bear in mind. Okay. So you decided you like this subject matter of ancient Greece or ancient time historical wargaming, and you're okay with the time issue that I've mentioned. That doesn't necessarily make a good game. So how will we go about evaluating whether this is a good game or not? And so we will start reviewing, and the way I like to do it is something I stole here. I'm just die. Okay, I'm gonna do something I stole from Bruce Garrick. I don't know if it's original to him. I don't know if he stole it from someone else or something like that. But he has a series on 4 games going all the way back to the 70s, all the way up to modern day on Dien Bien Phu, and which everyone should watch, even if you're not interested in that battle. There's so much history of board game design in there that it's completely worth it, not just for new guys, but even guys who've been playing board games a long time. A lot of good insights in there. Even Mark Herman should watch it. Yeah, I think anyone could get a lot of value out of it. Anyway, when he was evaluating these games, he's doing what we call the balanced triangle. And the way they got now, don't worry, I got a bunch of pieces of paper here, so it's going to absorb the Sharpie ink and won't get on the board. So don't worry too much about that. Hey, it's William Byrd. Check him out. Here, I'm going to draw a silly mustache on him. No, wait. Okay. So, and in this triangle, let's make a nice triangle here. I'll try to freehand it. Not too bad. Not so good. Anyway, the 3 elements that you're trying to balance in making a good game is the first part is, start with, balance. Like so. And the idea of balance is if 2 equally skilled players, knowledgeable and skilled players played the game, it would be a draw. The other element is historical accuracy. And I like to call this historical plausibility. And plausibility, something like that. Okay. And the idea here is basically, does this game reasonably reflect the historical record? It doesn't have to do it, accurately and perfectly, but I mean, is it plausible? Could this have happened in this situation? And the other one is evocative mechanics. Sorry for that sloppy writing. All right. Like that. And the evocative mechanics is the idea that what you're doing in the game is somehow analogous to what the actual historical figures did. Well, I guess if you handed this game, went back in time and handed this game to Pericles and says, "Hey, here's how the war's going," and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I recognize that. Yeah, that makes sense. We were doing that." Stuff like that. So let's start. All right, I can get rid of that. With historical plausibility. Now, earlier I had read you that little excerpt from Mark Herman where he mentions that he tried to design this game with the idea that things that happened in the actual war can and do happen in this game. And I think he hits the mark. Well, what I've said before is this is like Thucydides in a box. And I think he really did. We get the debate section over here, and if you read through cities, that is a vital part of what goes on here when we actually start moving forces around. So he captured that. And as far as the actual events that go on this war, again, the game syncs up historically. So you'll see he's done it right in the sense that, we got undisputed land power, Sparta, versus undisputed sea power, Athenians. But of course, it's not in absolute. Those aren't absolutes. The Athenians did capture Spartans on land. The Spartans eventually moved eastward, got Persian gold, and were able to buy a navy, and that ultimately got them the win. Occasionally, you'll see little weird things, I suppose. For instance, I had a Sicilian disaster. It was just in Corinth, and it was probably pretty early. Then, if you're going by the dates that the Second Peloponnesian War starts around turn 6 or so, it came fairly early, and that I suppose you could nitpick about that being possible. And I guess I gotta caveat that. I gotta add that to someone who's interested in this game. It depends on how compulsive you are about order and things like that. For instance, I remember I didn't like Paths of Glory. I just thought it was so much on the rails. There was card play that would kind of vary things up, and obviously the dice rolls in the battle would vary things up a little, but it is following the narrative of the actual World War I with very little variation, and I actually didn't like that. But I do know, if we went to something like For the People, I remember reading something on a forum where the guy drew his cards for the Civil War for the Union side, and he pulled up New York draft riots, and that really bothered him. He pulled it in like 1861, which even if you didn't use it in an event, it still bothered him that would show up in his hand. So it depends on how you feel about order and things like that. Otherwise, we see a lot of the historical elements here. So I got to give it high marks for historical accuracy, plausibility. And it's obviously made by someone who has studied this period a lot and really designed this game around that. And so anything else, the little things are just that. They're just really, you want to get persnickety, you can find saying, wow, that didn't really happen, things like that. But otherwise, I think he really hit the mark on the plausibility. So I'm going to give full marks on that. So next is, what do we want to do? I think I want to do, let's go with balance here. Now, to talk about balance, I need to distinguish between the solo game and the 4-player game, which I have not played. I don't think I can answer that. I can speculate. I think as far as if you got 4 players together, I think you would find this quite balanced. I didn't show you that you got little shields you can hide how many Strategos tokens you have and your issues, so when you place them, nobody can see what you're placing. I think you'll find that very conducive to a lot of bluffing and things like that. But I think overall, skill, it wouldn't be random who won and who didn't. It would be fairly consistent. The better players would consistently rise to the top. So I think balance probably for the 4-player game is great. In the solo player game with the bots, the problem is when you're going to a game in solo like this, you're really going for narrative rather than just a perfectly balanced game. One thing I noticed, first of all, I need to make an admission here. I kind of cheesed on that last debate when I was doing the playthrough, because I was following the bots fairly strictly, and this game lends itself a lot more than, say, like Andean Abyss or any of the coin games or something like that, where the flowchart is very specific about what you do, and you're kind of cheating when you break away from it. This one's a lot looser AI, and so you can, in fact, you're kind of encouraged to say, well, this is not a ideal play for this bot. I'm going to go ahead and override it. And you don't feel guilty about overriding it and things. But I didn't really do that, especially in that last turn, and I probably should have when he had ostracism on his table. and I was going for Sting, the controlling faction. I should have said, wait a minute. He knows it's the last turn. He would definitely go for ostracism. It might have changed the game. Okay, all right. So what? All right. Anyway, but there's other things I noticed too a little bit is that for one thing, I kind of didn't look at the end game scoring, and I had forgotten how much bases and control of theaters meant to the final score. The Athenians ended up with like 42 honor points of just in bases, which was way more than what is it? 6 times 4, like 24 that the Spartans got. Likewise, the Spartans get a 6-point bonus, 6 points for every land or every theater they control, and the Athenians only get 3. But here's the thing: the bot seemed to get stuck. First of all, I made 3 bases. I maxed out the bases in Athens, and Sparta. Their strategy matrix wanted to build a base here, but they couldn't, and so it kind of got the bot kind of stuck. So that's something to think about. And you didn't really see them going out for land. Just, getting more territory, getting that 6-point bonus, and it ended up being really a big difference. And so, if I was going to play this again, and I might, I like it, but I'm not going to play it for the camera. That's too much. I think I might make a little tweaks. And you notice that whenever the bot only gets so many issues in the debates, you're supposed to draw a random one. And usually randomly place that. I think I'm gonna, if I did this again, when I get those random issues, I would make more of a concerted effort to say, no, I'm not going to place this randomly. What I'm going to do is look on the map for an easy pickup for the bot, as far as controlling a territory or building a base. And I think that's how I'm going to make that little tweak there. And I think that I'll make for a more game that you can't really cheese, because the bot isn't expanding enough, and things like that. But as far as delivering the narratives, it was pretty good. And so I can't really quibble too much about the balance. So I might dock it a point or 2 off just for the solo bot. But, again, remembering that you're going for the narrative rather over other things like a puzzle that you're trying to perfect. So finally, we have the evocative mechanics. And I'll start by mentioning another game I've been playing recently, and is Atlantic Chase, which has done what I think is a pretty amazing reconsideration of how we do fog of war in board games. So it's definitely one you want to look at. This one also does that as well, and to a sense, in the sense that you have, these here, you got these orders in a region, and they're upside down. You can't read them. There's his order, they're on top of yours, and then you put yours up here, and you don't know what it is, and you don't know what the order is. Because when you get down to it, we're in this ancient period of war, where communication is very spotty, limited to how fast someone can run, or how fast they can row a ship. And so your intelligence is really limited in the ancient period. And this whole last in, first out order system, and the blindness of it, and also, kind of the commitments with the strategos, you kind of hide how many you're doing like that, creates what I consider kind of a very evocative mechanic of the fog of war in this period. And so I think that's done really well. Likewise, over in this section here, when we're playing these cards for the debates, we're going back to this whole idea that we're doing Thucydides in a box. And that's about as evocative as you can get. You're doing exactly what the book is doing. Is Thucydides will narrate these events over here that are happening, and then all these guys meet in their assemblies, and it says, okay, what are we going to do now, given the situation? And everyone's got their own agendas, and they're trying to jockey for position like that. It turns out in a card game, and of course the card games can't really convey. If you read those Thucydides speeches, it's those debates, those are very interesting. It'd be pretty hard to do something like that with the card games, but it does exactly what it's supposed to do, which is really evoke Thucydides and debates. Okay, what are the results of these? What are these decisions? And these decisions really had impact. Like I remember when one of these, I can't even remember what it is, Delian League states went into rebellion. They go into a debate over here in Athens, says let's kill every single one of these guys. And they send out the messaging ship, and the next day they kind of sober up and say, "Oh, that's too much." And they send a second ship to go chase that one to countermand the order, and it's a whole drama there. Don't really get that. It's hard to get that kind of sense of a dramatic event like that, with such a broad game like this. But I mean, you're doing everything in this game. Your mechanics are really doing what these guys were doing. And that also gets into the whole free movement mechanic, which I really like. It allows you to be very creative, and you're not stuck just, I'm going to send these guys over here, and so I have to take the most direct route and go over here. No, I can go up here and allow units to get stuck there and sneeze my units all over the map, and it allows some very creative movement. So finally, I mean, we'll put it all together. We've got great evocative mechanics. We got good historical plausibility. We have decent bounce, although I had to caveat a lot of that for the solo play versus multiplayer, which I don't have experience of. But that's a good triangle. This is really a good game if you pay attention. It may not be for you. Like I said, I mentioned, some people balk at this subject matter, because it's out of their usual World War II modern warfare element. And ancient games do tend to get the short shrift, I think, as far as war game popularity. I don't know. You want to argue with it? I'll listen. I'm sure a lot of people love it. I like it too. And what was the other thing? Evocative mechanics, historical plausibility. Yeah, just a good game. And I should point out, this game, as far as I know, is still available at GMT. They have not run out of stock of that yet, and some people are asking for, when's the second edition come out? Well, I should say something about that. First of all, components are fantastic. As GMT, this board is thick and just made of iron. I love the color here and things like that. This is I can't think of an alternative. Sometimes these boxes, I'm like, well, it's kind of like, looks like a hopscotch thing. I kind of like the coin games where it's like a true regional map, but I can't think how you would do this whole freeform movement things if you did like just regionals and not these boxes with the lines going between them. But looks great, fantastic. The cards, here I got a little nitpick, I suppose, and this is for something for the next. That's the only thing. That's the thing. This first edition is great. The only thing, of course, is rules, which have, it has some errata. A pretty good amount of errata. I don't know how to pronounce it. Which you can line in. It's not that troubling, honestly. So you could buy this first edition with confidence, knowing that you got an updated rule book and things like that. And it shouldn't be a problem. I mean, I can think of one little nitpick here. And it's true for the Athenians as well as the Spartans when you're playing these cards, is you always have your faction card with you. And if you're the aristocrats, or I forget, the Eurypontids or the Aegiad on the Spartan side, it's not a problem because look at that. They're all upright. But if you're the demagogues, you keep your cards like this. And then you have your faction leader card here. But look what happens. The other person looking says, wait a minute, why are 4 of his cards upside down and 1 upside right? Oh, that's his faction card. I will keep an eye out on that. So really, for the second edition, that's my only real fix, is just reverse the image on one side, but keep it the same on the other side, so that when your hand is like this, all the cards are exactly the same. Yep, that's it. So thanks for watching. That is my final thoughts. I do really enjoy this game. I'm sure I'm going to get this played some more. Just not in the immediate future. I kind of got to put it away for a while because that was a lot of playing of this game. And thank you for watching.